Hello everybody, Justin from Playing Board Games here for another Deck Tech. I want to start this video by thanking everyone for your support on this series so far. We're on the last Hemlock Vale Investigator. I've built the next deck for the series for Roll & Bank, so it should be pretty fun. But I just want to say thank you so much for your support on this series. Today we're going to be talking about Hank Samson, which I've already said on this channel before, and I'll probably say it again. Hank Samson is not one of my favorite Investigator designs. I don't like how his card pool sits in Calvin and Silas's space so much, and I think his ability is a little bit less exciting than it should be. So this actually took me a while. This was my third attempt at a Hank Samson deck. So I think this deck, I'll admittedly say this right at the start of this video, is a little bit looser than some of the other decks we have in this series, but I was able to find a Hank Samson deck that actually I feel hit my benchmarks for what I wanted for this series. So, welcome to Hank Samson and his Synergy of Slaughter. This is a fighter Hank Samson deck that explores the Synergy archetype using both Gang Up and Call for Backup as its payoffs. This deck is loaded with card draw to get Hank all set up, allowing him to dig for what he needs and ready to start his slaughter. So, this is actually a deck that you could have done in Calvin before this. But I think the problem with Calvin and that archetype, which he could do, is he the most viable? I don't necessarily think so. But something that Calvin Wright could do that differently than Hank for this, and I'm happy to go with this option for Hank, is that Calvin needs to not only set up his synergy pieces, but he also needs to set up Calvin Wright. Like, he needs to take more damage than the time comes. With Hank Samson, on the other hand, we're kind of just, like, ready to go. We don't need to worry about, like, finding the damage and horror on us. We just have a massive damage and horror pool that we're able to take advantage of, eventually turning to whichever version of the Resolute Hank that we want. And it allows us to then use our payoffs as soon as we have all the synergy pieces set up. So this deck is loaded with card draw to get Hank all set up, allowing him to dig for what he needs and ready to start his slaughter. Notably, this isn't actually going to go too deep into the Hank Samson Resolute versions. Really, it's kind of like depending on how you're going in the situation and how things are set up. But honestly, the Six Fist version is kind of hard to say no to. But like with most Hanks, survival, you don't need to rush it. Like, survival is key, but that's not this Hank Samson. This is a Synergy Hank Samson. As you can see, this is actually the smallest amount of of decks that we need for expansions for this series so far. It's actually kind of crazy. So we have the Core Revised Core, obviously, that's like going to be in all of these videos. We have the Path to Carcosa, we have Forgotten Age, we have Dream Eaters, Scarlet Keys, Edge of the Earth, Feast of Hemlock Vale, and Nathaniel Cho. Luckily, all of these are out in their repackaged versions, so we don't need to pick up random packages with Innsmouth, which, if you do not know, has been announced, so that is pretty sweet. Let's get to the level 0 version of this deck, which, admittedly, is not showcasing what this deck's going to be into. This is Synergy decks because so much of it is loaded in the experience. The level 0 versions of the deck don't really bring the noise to it. We can see a few small pieces as we get, like, going. So you can see, like, the initial start of some of our synergy stuff. We have Sledgehammer and Talus Protection, which gives us the Guardian cards and the Mystic cards. We have Idol of Xanatos hanging out here, which is part of our method of survival. We have some things that you can see can synergize it with Fortuitous Discovery. We have Improvised Weapon. Like, these are things that can synergize with it. So we have, like, small inklings of where we're going to be going, and otherwise we have things like extra damage and toe-to-toe and long shot. We have some card draw and glory, and then, like, perseverance to keep us alive. But the upgraded version is where things really start to fall into place, and we're going to get into the upgrade path as we get into deeper. But you can see that, like, there's a lot of pieces that stay, but we're also getting a lot more card draw, so we're going to be more consistent in finding our pieces as we get further into the campaign. But we're also getting just, like, you know, some bigger hits to go along with our Sledgehammer, which is also upgraded. But why don't we dive in and look at the cards individually and then the upgrade path, and then we'll round out this video. So here is our synergy package. Call for backup, gang up, and strength in number. The strength in numbers, rather. These cards are our payoff, but they won't be the first upgrades we put into our deck. I know that's kind of, like, strange, but that's the kind of issue that exists with the Synergy archetype, that unless you're like people like Zoe Samaras, Lola Hayes, Carolyn Fern is another one, and probably honestly also kind of Vincent Lee can probably do it pretty well as, too. But like to be able to get to the payoffs, you kind of need to like just make sure your deck is functional before you start getting really deep into the Synergy package. So we're going to have all these cards in our deck eventually, but they're not going to be our priority upgrades. We're going to have a few small things, maybe a certain hammer made of sledge that we will be doing first. So the game plan with these cards is simple. Dig through your deck, find all your assets and multiple class assets, play those assets, and reap rewards with these cards. Call for backup is just value and is easy to hold in the hand until you get set up. Also in a pinch, if you really need it, commit it to a test. It's not going to feel great, but if you need to do it, you need to do it. Gang up deals insane damage when fully set up. So we are having, I'll just go back here for a second. So Sledgehammer gives us Guardian. Talisman of Protection gives us Mystic. Crafty is going to give us Seeker and Rogue. We have Survivor because of Hank's ability. When you have all of these pieces in play, and notably Hank does have a bigger deck size, but that's why we have so much card draw to get things going, we're going to be able to take advantage of Gang Up, which is going to deal +5 and +5. So that's really impressive. And for like a really crazy turn, you know, you can just like hit with your sledgehammer, throw out a Gang Up. Or we also, if all else fails, this is still just a sledgehammer deck. Like we can still just, as our good friend Hank Samson, swing the sledgehammer and use our other stuff as backup. Lastly, we have Strength in Numbers. This will scale better with than an Unexpected Courage as it goes, and this is what the Unexpected Courage is going to turn into and with our upgrade plan. But basically this just gives you an additional wild icon for each different class of cards you control. So these are the 6 cards in our deck that are part of this Synergy Slaughter package that we're going to use to take advantage of other things. If you are in a situation where you need to fire off these cards, but you do not have your entire Synergy package set up, just frickin' do it. If you're trying to wait for the best opportunity, odds are you're going to stumble more than you are going to sprint. All right, next up we got our Synergy Enablers. Sledgehammer is our weapon of choice, so it's a key piece of our deck's function. We want to find the Sledgehammer. While we don't have any targeted card selection to find it, our deck focuses on big boosts of card draw, and the reason for this is because we also want to dig out our Talisman of Protection and our one of Crafty. Notably, if you want to go even deeper, I do suggest like Backpack isn't a bad choice for this deck. I don't think there's any reason that you can't run it. I always, in my own decks, kind of play a little bit close to the, like, I kind of play a little bit close to the chest. I play a little bit, well, I guess not close to the chest. I play a little bit fast and loose, and I just trust I'm going to get there. And we have a lot of card draw and stuff like that to help us dig out the things. We only need to find 1 copy of our Sledgehammer. That's like the only priority thing in our deck. And remember that Hank Samson does have 35 cards. We could go with the Backpack to help us get there more. Honestly, it really comes down to your choice. Again, these are kind of like blueprints of decks concepts that I would take with them. And then you can also take these blueprints and turn them into your own masterful design. Like that's kind of just like the power that you have. And I honestly fully support it. So like it's one of those things that we want to be able to find the Sledgehammer. And while we're choosing to do that with card draw, I don't think Backpack is a crazy choice to get there. We have other tools to find it, which we'll cover in the guide pretty soon. Next up, we have Talisman and Crafty. They're going to sit in play to boost our Synergy cards, but if you do need to solve a problem, once again, don't worry about waiting for all 5 classes to start firing those Synergy cards off. So it might be strange that Talisman Protection is just kind of sitting there, but it is a way for us to protect Hank, if need be, either version of him. So it's just something that's going to sit into play until you need to pop it off. And luckily with Hank, you have a big health pool, so you're not going to need to pop it off too early. We do have some things that we can use with Crafty. And admittedly, it's not the tightest thing, right? It's a little bit strange. As I said, this deck, it took me a while to find a Hank deck that was a little bit more interesting than just either the Hank that I've built before for a previous guide, or alternatively for a Hank that I think is bad, which is like the clue getting Hank. You could do it, but I don't think it's great. Not yet, anyway. So that's kind of like why I went on the Synergy one, because it was interesting and all that. However, I needed to find a Rogue and a Seeker card, and I went with Crafty because it works with Sledgehammer, but it also works with Fortuitous Discovery, which might look strange here, and I agree it is, because I'm not a big fan of Fortuitous Discovery, but it does have some synergy with our deck in the form of Idol of Xanatos, which we're going to be getting to. Again, as I said at the bottom, if you feel that this would work better, not with Crafty, but with something else, like Bruiser or Grizzly Totem, do that. Do it, right? I fully support changing these ideas to what works better for your playstyle, because I'm just one guy. Taking my list one-to-one, I don't think is ever the way. You should tweak it for what works better for your playstyle and the cards that you like. All right, but let's keep this going. Honestly, I would play this deck. And I might bring it to a game day coming up soon, because I do think this deck would be a great time. I know it might sound like I'm like hedging my bets and being like, you know what, maybe don't play this deck. I think you should play this deck, but with all of these decks, I think you should feel free to change it to make it your own. All right, a Hank Samson without Soak, that's crazy. But yes, I'm feeling a little reckless, but we replaced our Soak with Synergy. We're going to be using Hank's health pool as an ability rather than the cards to protect our ability, right? So Hank's health pool, because he gets that extra card of health, horror, and damage, sanity and damage that he can soak, we're using that as his ability. So we have Idol of Xanatos as a key piece for our survival. Like Sledgehammer, we're going to want to make this a priority. Again, another reason why backpack might work, but that is just another piece of our economy that we're going to need to worry about figuring that all out. We'll be able to start discarding cards recklessly to stop taking damage and horror when we want to, and this is due to the synergy that we have with Madame Lebranche, who is our ally of choice, and also Nothing Left to Lose, which you're going to be looking at in a nearby frame. Our discard payoff are cards like Fortuitous Discovery, which I just mentioned on the previous slide, as well as Improvised Weapon, which I think is actually going to be pretty baller. You could also just fire off Improvised Weapon as an attack, but I think that you want to be able to hold it for your Idol of Xanatos, use it to prevent some damage or horror, and then put the Improvised Weapon into your discard pile to play again. I think this is a really fun package, and I think you could go even deeper with it. I think there's like an Idol of Xanatos, like Hank, that you could do to flex a little bit and use things like Winging It and Matchbox, but that's not this deck, but that might be a future deck in the future. Keeping this going, it's time to talk about my favorite part, the economy. Let's go! Nothing Left to Lose is one of the strongest economy cards in the game. So it costs 3 experience, but it's worth it. You gain up to 5 resources, you draw up to 5 cards, then you remove it from the game. With Idol of Xanatos, this will probably consistently be able to draw us 3 to 5 cards very consistently, and then we get some resources on top of that as well. It's very strong, and we're going to be aggressive with our discards because of that reason, especially as we're digging for our synergy pieces. The idea is that if you find Nothing Left to Lose and you have an Idol of Xanatos and a Sledgehammer in play, your thought process is now, okay, how can I get my hand loaded up with a new opening hand, essentially, because that's what this basically does, to find those pieces that I need. At a Crossroads is a similarly powerful survivor card. If you don't need the cards, get them somewhere else. If you don't need the cards, maybe take an action. It's one of those things that you can decide when it's drawn, when the dilemma presents itself. And then Take Heart is obviously a strong economy card in Survivor, and it's very easy to trigger with Hank's book. So we have 6 cards in our deck that are all about burst card draw. They replace themselves and give an additional card or cards. Like Take Heart gives you 1 additional card after replacing itself. At a Crossroads and Nothing Left to Lose are both going to be super card positive when you play them. So while we don't have like Backpack to get us there, we do have these boost card draw to help us get there even quicker. Last but not least, we have Emergency Cash to give us resources. If I had a few more XP, I'd look at upgrading this into eCash too, because it gives your deck even more draw consistency. Alright. Coming up next, we got some cards that are here to boost our ability to fight, in addition to the Sledgehammer and the Improvised Weapon. Sweeping Kick, it was a last-minute addition. It originally was actually an Earthly Serenity 1, because I thought I wanted a bit more consistency with how I get my synergy cards, but it didn't feel as right in Hank, so I went with Sweeping Kick instead. really nice card. Our last method of damage is a push to the limit. It requires additional sledgehammer, so that's why it's only a 1 of in our deck. Don't hold on to it if you haven't found our sledgehammer. Commit it to relevant tests to make your potential nothing left to lose stronger, or use it to boost the Idol of Xanatos to prevent yourself from taking damage or horror. Being able to trigger the bottom action on the sledgehammer with a push to the limit, though, is a very, very fun feeling and a very, very fun effect. Our last 2 cards, I think these are our last cards. These might just be our last skills. They're very simple. Longshot deals more damage, and Overpower replaces itself. You can look at upgrading Longshot into Strong Armed if you want to be like making your Sledgehammer's triple action more consistent, but I don't think it's necessarily very urgent. So these just round out our deck. Our upgrade order. As always, adjust this to how you feel the deck is performing as you're playing. I think a hard, fast upgrade order is not usually accurate. I do feel like there is a little bit of leeway that the upgrades provide that you should use in the moment. Our first 8 experience is going to be going in to upgrade our sledgehammers to make our weapon more consistent. Of course, you can do this in batches. So, like, if you make 6 experience, you could buy 1 sledgehammer and, like, 2 gang-ups, for example, right? Or if you make like 7 experience, buy a sledgehammer and a crafty, right? Our next batch is the jury rig, 1 jury rig to a crafty, 1 jury rig to a culver back up 2. Our toe-to-toes are going to turn into gang-ups. You could leave the toe-to-toes there reasonably as well. It's entirely possible. I think the card's really good. Yeah, so like you could just keep it in if you want some more consistency with your damage potential. End of the roads are going to turn into Nothing Left to Lose in our next package. Perseverance, a Sweeping Kick, Strength in Numbers. It's going to be the Unexpected Courages. Again, when they're in batches like that, it's kind of like choose the order that you want. And then we have a Daring's going to turn to a Call to Backup, and our Glories are going to turn into Add a Crossroads. And this is kind of like our upgrade plan. As you see, it doesn't really get like crazy bombastic. It just kind of makes the deck more consistent as you upgrade. These are just some things that you can look forward to for the plan and how you want to make this deck work. So again, this deck I think is probably one of the jankiest ones in the series so far, because it kind of just like you're going all in on this synergy plan and the sledgehammer plan, but we do have a lot of ways for us to get what we need. I really dig it. I hope maybe you dig it too. As I said earlier on in the video, I have started the core set investigators for this. I built a awesome Roland Banks deck with some help of my streaming viewers, where I stream every Tuesday and Friday, by the way. So we're going to be looking forward to all of these. I'm going to be trying to build decks that I haven't tried for these investigators before, or alternatively decks that are a little bit more outside of the box than what I normally would bring to them, while still bringing that Justin strive for consistency and low to the ground efficiency that I love so much. Huge thank you to all of our patrons for supporting the channel. I hope you have a great one. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you guys in a few weeks for Roland Banks. But in the meantime, have a good one. And as always, GG's.